Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Greg Stewart, and I am beyond honored to have you walk through this course with me. And thank you so much for purchasing it. Hopefully, obviously, it is worth every penny that you put into it. And I want to do everything I can to help you grow and help you mature and help you reach to the next level of becoming more. I can say that I have walked through this journey myself and deeper dive into our negative emotions, which is a tough journey, but it's a journey that is incredibly, incredibly worth it. My company is Becoming More Counseling, Coaching, and Consulting. And my motto is everyone becomes what they want to, only some people think about becoming more. And that's the key. So changing our mental models to become more than what we are. And as we walk through this book, I Cubed, Unlock the Inner Strength Behind Your Negative Emotions, step by step. Hopefully this will help you have some serious breakthroughs in your own journey. And so let's begin through the process. But before I do that, let me give some background on myself. First, I live in Rockwall, Texas with my beautiful and wonderful, perfect wife, Lisa. We've been married for 10 years and we have 7 children between the two of us. And at this point, we have 1 grandchild, Dean, who is absolutely a beautiful young boy. But originally, I am from Michigan. So go blue. Now, I might have lost a bunch of you already, but I'm originally from Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I way back in the 70s, I became a Christian. Like a lot of us went to junior church. I did too. And in Sunday school, became a Christian, raised my hand to accept Jesus as my personal savior. But my parents quit going to church, which meant I quit going to church, and then did the proverbial party hardy teen years, and then very much suffered the consequences from those years, and then recommitted my life to Christ when I was 20 years old. Well, I found my way back to the same church that I became a Christian at when I was a child, and a lot of the same people were already there, and I immediately felt at home. Well, I grew a lot and felt called into the ministry and talked to the pastors, and they actually sent me on a short-term missions trip to Guyana, South America. So the summer of 1993, first time ever on a plane, I flew to Guyana, South America, and spent 10 weeks doing missions work there. And down there is where I was officially called into the ministry. Came back from that missions trip and spent a year in upstate New York at a Bible Institute called Word of Life Bible Institute. Came back into my internship at the church, and me and my then fiance were wanting to already move to Texas, but the senior pastor met with me and said, I know you have your heart set on Dallas, Greg, but I'd like to challenge that. So he asked me to be the youth pastor, and then began my journey as a pastor, as well as at the same church I became a Christian at as a child. So beautiful experience. Well, back in those days, in the 90s, a lot of us had tons of credit hours, but no degree. And I was one of those. I had like 160 credit hours, but no degree. And a lot of the colleges started up adult and continuing education programs where it was like one night a week for a year and you get your bachelor's degree. So the degree that they offered was in organizational leadership. And I enjoyed it. It was good material, but I wanted to get to seminary. So I began seminary in 1997, which is the Master of Divinity, which is Greek, Hebrew theology. In my first semester of seminary, I took a general ed course called Philosophy of Counseling, and it was my mind exploded because I realized how powerful that material could be, as well as how much I needed to grow in my own self because I had issues, right? So I immediately mapped out a dual master's degree, and so in 3 years I got my Master of Divinity in the year 2000, graduated and became ordained. And then at that same time, I had another perfect storm where I became the associate pastor, and a new pastor came in. And I went on vacation to Mobile, Alabama. I was perusing the psychology section of Barnes & Noble and came across the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Again, another defining moment that just kind of mapped out the rest of my career. As well, I started teaching as an adjunct professor in all of the organizational leadership courses that I took in my undergrad, and immediately fell in love with leadership. And then I started to see leaders and began to see the good leaders and the bad leaders. And it was just a revolutionary experience that I had during those years as an associate pastor. Well, I got my master's in counseling in 2003, and then became the senior pastor, and then started my PhD in counselor education supervision from Regent University. And then it all came together when I did my dissertation. I did my dissertation on the relationship of emotional intelligence with job satisfaction and organizational commitment. And through that journey, after that, I had a gentleman in my church who was a vice president of human resources at a very powerful medical device company. And he brought me in, and that's where I learned my executive coaching skills as well as consulting skills, and grew in that process. Well, I left the church in 2010, had a great experience, great 15 years there, and ventured off to do different things, and eventually moved to Texas in 2012, finally. And then I got a job as an organizational development strategist where I flew around the country for 3 years, meeting with senior leadership teams of all industries, of all sizes, doing executive coaching with the leaders and the like. Because I worked for an assessments company, and that what they did was they benchmarked top performers, as well as they had Leadership 360 assessments, and that's what I would tap into to do the leadership coaching. Well, the company got bought out, and about 80% of us got laid off. Very difficult experience of getting laid off, but if you haven't tried it yet, very growthful experience. And then eventually I landed at a residential treatment center at a behavioral health hospital, became the director there, and absolutely fell in love with that work. And I talk about it in the book, working with teenage girls and boys who were very, very troubled. So had then in 2020 transitioned from that hospital to what I'm doing now, and I'm a full-time telehealth counselor and coach, consultant, and I see about 40 clients a week. Majority of my clients are via Zoom like this, and then began the process of writing my books. So great career, I've loved it, but what I didn't tell you, but I talk about in my book, is that back in 2011, I had an emotional affair. Right. So I was a pastor and a marriage counselor, and my marriage wasn't doing well, and ended up having an emotional affair, which means I didn't do anything physically, but it was definitely emotional and very, very inappropriate. Well, because I was a pastor and a marriage counselor, it just, as you might imagine, rocked my world, because I'm like, what am I doing? Right. So I just had to do a deep dive, and that began a journey, about a 7-8 year journey, where I had to walk into my own heart and figure out these negative emotions. And from that 7 or 8 year journey, I wrote my first book, which is this basis of this course. The IQ principle, which we'll get into, I've had that in my mind for years and years and years, but the IQ process, but most of the content of the book came out of my growing experience since the emotional affair. So it was a very, very powerful experience. And that's what I want to walk you through. And I help clients all the time now, as far as, in counseling. When I meet with them, I have them purchase my book, and we use that book as a foundation for their own personal growth and development by unlocking the inner strength behind their negative emotions. All right, so let's dive in a little bit. So course overview, module 1, of course, introduction, and we talk about emotional goals versus emotional paths, which, we have to separate them and distinguish them. We'll get into that. Module 2 is the blind can't see, understanding blind spots. And those first 2 chapters, really, it really sets the tone of being teachable and open, and needing to understand what our mental models are and how much work our mental models need to change. So it's really a couple chapters on just the psychobabble kind of stuff, but I want to absolutely set the framework that we have to grow, we have to change, and it's really about not only just being teachable, but diving in and being tenacious about our growth and development in those first 2 chapters. Module 3, chapter 3, starts getting into the foundation of it. So we're talking about emotional inflation and the 3 tenets of emotional management. And module 4, the matrix of insecurity. So we begin with, after we talk about the foundation, my main emotions I walk through are insecurity, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, and depression. And module 4 is really about the foundation of the chapter on insecurity, where that really is the key that kind of unlocks and opens the door to what we have to dive into. And in module 5, we talk about identity, value, and worth. And a lot of times, believe it or not, when I work with clients, a lot of times I'll just have them just immediately go to chapter 5 in the book and start learning about identity, value, worth, because that's really what we need as a foundation. Module 6, that which threatens me, goes through the rest of the motion. So module 4, chapter 4 talks about insecurity, but module 6, chapter 6 goes through the rest of emotions, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, and depression, and breaks those down and equips you how to use those. Chapter 7, module 7 is about the gift of trauma. I know it sounds paradoxical, but it will make sense because when it comes to healing, everybody who actually heals would say, I'm stronger now than I've ever been. I wouldn't wish that trauma upon anybody, but I'm stronger now than I've ever been. And then module 8, chapter 8 is applying I cubed as the culmination and the conclusion and integration of these principles. So we begin this journey and look forward to it. So let's dive in right into module 1. Okay. Now in module 1, we first begin when I talk about the growth process, right? Give a history with my dad where he talked about the status quo, and we're in the status quo right now, but the status quo is basically what is. But every single one of us, just whether it's in our conscious minds or our subconscious minds or what have you, we are analyzing everything by a gap analysis, right? So which basically simply means that what is versus what should be. Okay, there's always a gap, frankly, in everything. It's like aspects of my own life, what I am versus what I want to be or what I should be, right? Whether it be in my physical development or health, when it comes to my emotional, mental success at work, standard of living, it doesn't matter what it is. And we also observe other people, like we look at other people and saying this is where they are, this versus where they should be, right? There's always a gap analysis, right? So in our process of trying to close the gap between what is and what should be, it's kind of, we break that down into basically two things versus what is it that we want to change, because we all want to change and be different. Well, there's two kinds of ways of looking at that. One is that we want to simply stop behaviors that are causing problems. Okay, it's real simple. We want to stop behaviors that are causing problems. And in that process, what behaviors are happening is that are causing problems? Like, are we not exercising? Are we getting too angry? Are we drinking too much? Whatever it may be, if we have behaviors that we want to stop, or we're not doing behaviors we should be doing and it's actually causing problems, we wake up and we want to change those behaviors. So I'm actually recording this on New Year's Day. So we have all those New Year's Day resolutions, and that's basically the premise. We want a fresh start. It's like, what does it say? It's the new year, new you, or something like that. So in the process, we want to either stop behaviors that are causing problems, or we want to add behaviors that make us more successful. Okay. So there's two kinds of number lines. I've got one on the screen here, which I'll get to in a second. But the first number line, think of it as -10 to +10. Okay, -10 is the worst things have ever been. So -10 to 0 is like problems that are being caused, like the first one. Like we want to stop behaviors that are causing problems. And that would be that. So we could be in the negative side of the number line when it comes to our negative emotions, right? So people come for counseling because they feel like their negative emotions are getting in the way of everyday living. Okay, it's key. So that's on the negative side of the number line. But once they stabilize and we're kind of neutral, it's like nothing really bad's happening in our lives. But then we want to focus on the positive side of the number line, which is like coaching and developing and becoming all the more effective and efficient. We want to become better. We want to become more successful. We want to become more patient. We want to become more knowledgeable. Whatever it is, that's the key. It's on the positive side of the number line. It's coaching. So there's still a gap, but it's more motivating. We want to become more effective. The number line that's on the screen is the way to look at it is to, instead of comparing ourselves with everybody else and becoming more, I often use the bell curve of there are 100 Gregs on the bell curve, right? So I'm not sitting there going, well, I can never achieve the 100 percentile of all people. We don't have to worry about that because there's 100 of you on the number line in any given area. So when it comes to me being a husband, there's 100 Gregs, right? The 0 percentile Greg, which is the worst husband I could be, or the 100 percentile Greg, which is the best husband I could be. There's a bell curve when it comes to me as a dad, me as a grandfather, me as a therapist, me as a Christian, whatever it is, there's 100. So there's a gap between that 100 percentile Greg and where I am currently. So it's not really that important as far as what my current percentile rank is. The key is to recognize the gap between where I am currently and the difference between this Greg and the Greg at the 100th percentile. And then we define what are those elements and those keys that would be the difference between me and that 100 percentile Greg. And I start working on those elements, right? What kind of attributes do I need to have? Should I be more patient with my wife? Should I listen better? Should I pursue her more? Or what have you? So it puts me and realizes that I can be better than what I am. And instead of comparing myself to everybody else, there is a 100 percentile Greg that is real, right? That could exist. And that way I kind of take away all the excuses of, comparing myself to everybody else. So what's the gap analysis in whatever area you want to grow in between where you are and that 100 percentile you? So start doing that analysis of the gap and what is the list of things differentiating you from where you currently are and that 100 percentile you. Okay. So gap analysis. So in our process, as we step back and we look at areas that we want to grow in, we can even kind of get a broader view that, and this is a premise where I say that everything we do is trying to achieve an emotional goal. Okay. So we want to feel something on an ongoing basis. Okay. So there's micro emotional goals, what we want to feel or not feel in this moment. So let's say I don't want to feel thirsty, so I take a drink. I don't want to feel hungry, so I eat. I don't want to feel tired, so I sleep. Or it could be more relational of I don't want to feel criticized, or I want to feel validated. I want to feel significant. Let's say I'm at work. I want to feel successful, right? I don't want to feel anxiety. So in the micro, it's always here in the now of what I want to feel. And that what I want to feel is fine, right? The emotional goals are always good. Well, always in the peripheral is our macro emotional goals, okay? Our macro emotional goals are just a bigger picture of, I can just say it's our quality of life, right? As measured by achieving our standard of living, right? So we want to increase our standard of living. A lot of us do, and have this or that, and that's completely fine. It's goals in life. But also, our macro emotional goals are made up of living our value set, right? When we live our values, our ethics, then that's achieving our macro emotional goals and the big picture of fulfilling destiny, calling, and purpose. That even though we may not, a lot of us may not think about it, recognize it, it's still there. A lot of us still want to feel like we leave a legacy. A lot of us want to feel successful in each of our roles, and that's part of our destiny, calling, and purpose. And as we're pursuing both goals, then it's a matter of, am I achieving these goals? Later on in the book, I'll just say it now, that when I talk about a mood I'm in, so what emotions we're feeling, a lot of times I used to say a mood is like a bunch of thoughts or emotions enmeshed together that can't really differentiate. It's just I'm in a mood. But my current definition of the mood, the one I use in the book, is a mood is our most current evaluation of the degree of success or failure at how well we're doing at achieving our macro emotional goals. If in recent history we've been feeling successful, we're in a good mood. But if in recent history we feel unsuccessful at achieving our micro and macro emotional goals, it impacts our mood. So that's what I think our mood is being aware of our most recent history at achieving both our macro and micro emotional goals. Okay, so emotional goals are good. Whatever it is that we want to feel, it's not that it's bad, and that's not even the issue. It's like, what do I want to feel? But the next thing we need to evaluate, though, is we're all making decisions and choices, and we do actions to try and achieve those emotional goals. Okay, so the emotional goals are good, but we have to differentiate and separate the emotional goals from the paths we're taking to get there. And it's the paths that need to be evaluated, because it's in the paths, the behaviors, the choices that are either causing problems or not. And it's based in, I use the terms rational, healthy, wise, and right. RHWR. I use it all the way through all my books. So even though the emotional goals are good, I may not be using the most rational, healthy, wise, and right paths to achieve those goals. And that is what is causing problems. So simple example is if I am stressed out and I don't want to feel stressed, the path I'm taking is to feel something different as I drink alcohol every night after work in order to not feel stressed. Well, the emotional goal is being achieved, but it is not a rational, healthy, wise, or right path to get there. So I need to change paths. When I talked about the girls at the residential treatment center, they wanted to feel something different, so they would self-harm. Again, the emotional goal is good, but not rational, healthy, wise, and right path. If you want your spouse to respect you and you yell at them or you pull back, right? Whatever it is you do, if you overeat, if you don't exercise because you don't want to feel pain, right? So whatever it is, our pathways have to be evaluated according to whether or not they're rational, healthy, wise, and right. And all the behaviors you want to change. If you want to decrease anxiety, okay, what pathways are you taking to do that? If you want to decrease your anger, what pathways are you taking? Depression, whatever it is. We are trying to feel like we get into emotion being energy. We're burning that emotional energy. And the way we burn it, the choices we make are either rational, healthy, wise, and right, or not. When I do a lot of marriage counseling, a lot of times in the way we speak to our spouse, what our opinion is and what our point is might be great, and our emotional goal is good, but the way we're expressing it, the path is not rational. It's not healthy. It's not wise or right. A lot of behaviors, it doesn't mean like what we're doing is not necessarily irrational or unhealthy or even wrong. It's just not the most wise. So this rational, healthy, wise, and right, it's like objective truth that hovers above us all. Okay? So we have to separate, saying, what emotional goal am I trying to achieve? And then what pathways am I taking to get there? A lot of times in our society, we talk about, people that they want to feel something, right? They want to feel accepted. They want to feel admired. They want to feel like they are loved. They want to feel like they have an identity, whatever it is. But there's obviously great debates in our country around the pathways that people take to achieve those emotional goals. So if we merge the emotional goal with the path, that's actually what causes a lot of conflict, because when you're disagreeing with someone or someone disagrees with you about your path, the natural human response is to think that they're also trying to block your emotional goal, right? And that's crucial. So if somebody takes a certain path that we believe is unhealthy or irrational to achieve love, they see us as blocking the emotional goal of them being loved, so they call us haters, right? So we have to separate the emotional goal from the path that people take. Matter of fact, in conflict resolution, when you're disagreeing with someone, part of my advice is to agree with and try and discover what the person's emotional goal is that they're trying to achieve. What do they want to feel? They want to feel like they're successful or significant. They want to feel safe or secure. They want to feel like they're a good parent, a good worker, whatever it is. They want to feel something. And it's super easy to agree with them on what they're wanting to feel, right? So you can immediately validate them on what they're trying to feel, and vice versa, what you're trying to feel. But we still have to evaluate, is this the most rational, healthy, wise, and right path to achieve it? And it may not be. So we have to be honest and open and truthful with ourselves that the paths we're taking to achieve our emotional goals are actually backfiring, or they're causing other issues. So we have to switch to different paths. Okay. Now, there's a lot of things that are blocking that. Otherwise, just the knowledge of it will just change, right? Just switch paths. But because of our mental model is, very ingrained in that we've been choosing this path for a long time. So just that alone, changing habits, is difficult. But recognizing that there are plenty other paths we can take to achieve the same emotional goal, but just define the emotional goal first. And then you can choose different paths. Secondly is to recognize that there is loss by switching paths, okay? Like the drinking, if I chose to not drink or chose a different way to achieve the same emotional goal, I am losing the feeling that those first couple of drinks offers, right? So there is loss in changing emotional paths. Okay. So your homework for module 1 is to list all non-rational, healthy, wise, and right behaviors you want to change, right? So you might already have some in mind. That's why you're taking this course. But what are those behaviors? So when you have those behaviors, with each behavior, name the emotional goal that you are trying to achieve via that behavior, right? I'm trying to feel this. So when I'm doing this behavior, this is what I'm trying to feel or not feel. Right? So label the emotional goal that you're trying to feel or not feel. And then recognize, which you probably already do, that the current path you're on is not rational, healthy, wise, or right. Okay? Then once you separate those, say, okay, what are other pathways that are rational, healthy, wise, and right that won't cause consequences? What are the pathways are there? And there are countless other pathways that we can take to achieve the emotional goal. Again, especially when it comes to relationships. Because if you want to feel something with someone else and they're blocking your goal, there are other ways in order to achieve your emotional goals. Okay, so list those out. Then recognize that by switching paths, there is going to be loss. So just recognize that loss. And it's going to be a matter of discipline to switch paths. And that's the whole human change process. But don't worry. It's a matter of fighting, and they're going to fail and recover and succeed by adopting rational, healthy, wise, and right paths. And a verse that greatly has motivated me is when I would fail, I would say to myself that a righteous man may fall 7 times, yet he will rise again. But the wicked shall fall by calamity because they don't change and they continue to suffer the consequences. But though a righteous man may fall 7 times, yet he will rise again. So to give you hope, and get this process started with emotional goals, separating it from our emotional paths and just stepping back and looking at the framework, and then list as many of those behaviors as you can, the emotional goals that you're trying to achieve with each of those behaviors, and then what other pathways can you take to achieve the same emotional goals. Okay? All right, let's begin the journey together, and we are off to module 2.